World News in 5. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to World News in 5 on El Radio Phoenix. I'm Jack Storm. It is Thursday, August 13th, and here's what we're watching this morning. The Strait of Hormuz remains at the center of the U.S. Iran confrontation. Oil prices are falling, but the geopolitical risk isn't. Colombia is still digging through the devastation left by a deadly earthquake. Latin America is preparing for what scientists say could become an exceptionally powerful El Niño. Cuba is marking the 100th anniversary of Fidel Castro's birth amid a deepening economic crisis. And tonight, NFL preseason football is officially back. Plus, weather, markets, and our dumbass of the day. Let's get started. U.S. News. We begin with the U.S. economy. Yesterday's inflation report came in relatively close to expectations. Consumer prices rose 0.1% in July, with inflation at 3.4% over the past year. Core inflation rose 2.5% annually. The report helped strengthen expectations that the Federal Reserve could have room to lower interest rates later this year. But there's a catch: oil. And the Fed's Atlanta District President, Cheryl Venable, warned Tuesday that inflation remains too high and that the outlook for interest rates depends heavily on what happens in the Middle East. So Wall Street got some good news yesterday, but nobody is popping the champagne yet. And there's another major story coming out of Washington. Reuters reports the Trump administration is facing criticism over its record on combating human trafficking. Federal prosecutions have fallen sharply, with Reuters analysis finding just 73 sex trafficking cases charged through June, about 22% below the average of the previous 3 years. Officials and advocates point to staffing reductions, budget changes, and a shift of resources toward immigration enforcement as contributing factors. That's a serious story because trafficking cases depend heavily on specialized investigators, prosecutors, and victim support services. And the debate now is whether the administration's priorities are leaving those resources too thin. Meanwhile, the administration is continuing its push to strengthen domestic supplies of critical minerals. Washington has committed billions of dollars toward minerals and battery projects, arguing that the United States needs to reduce its dependence on foreign supply chains for materials important to defense and technology. And the administration's immigration enforcement continues as well. The State Department says more than 175,000 visas have been revoked under the Trump administration. So immigration, trade, and national security policy remain firmly at the center of Washington's agenda. World Watch. Now to the biggest international story. Iran and the United States are making competing claims over the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian officials say the strait is under Iranian control. President Trump has claimed the United States has achieved control of the waterway. The reality on the ground is considerably more complicated. Shipping remains far below normal levels following the conflict between the two countries. Iran says the strait will remain restricted unless Washington meets its conditions. The United States says it wants freedom of navigation and compensation from Iran. And meanwhile, the world's energy markets are watching every ship that moves through the Gulf. There is also a disturbing development involving shipping. The United States and Iran-aligned forces have reported new attacks involving vessels in the region as negotiations have stalled. That means the risk isn't just diplomatic anymore, it's commercial. Every additional attack raises insurance costs, shipping costs, and eventually the cost of energy. And Iran's state media is having a little fun at President Trump's expense. Iranian outlets are mocking Trump over reports that his aircraft was secretly switched during a recent trip after U.S. security officials determined there was a credible missile threat. Politics in the Middle East apparently now comes with memes. Latin America and the Caribbean. And now, our dedicated Latin America and the Caribbean report. First, Colombia. Rescue operations continue after the devastating earthquake that struck western Colombia earlier this week. President Abelardo de la Espriella has promised a reconstruction fund as rescuers enter another critical phase of the search. The earthquake has already killed more than 250 people, and officials warn the toll could rise as crews reach areas that remain difficult to access. The disaster comes just days after Colombia's new president took office, and his administration now faces one of its biggest tests: getting emergency aid to communities, restoring infrastructure, and helping thousands of displaced families rebuild their lives. Now let's widen the lens. Scientists are warning that Latin America could be facing an exceptionally powerful El Niño. Reuters reports that the developing climate pattern could become one of the strongest ever recorded. El Niño can dramatically affect rainfall, drought, agriculture, and food production across South America and Central America. Argentina and Brazil are among the world's major agricultural exporters, meaning unusual weather there can eventually affect global food prices. So this isn't just a weather story, it's a food story, a farming story, and potentially a grocery store story. And in the Caribbean, Cuba is marking the 100th anniversary of Fidel Castro's birth. But the anniversary arrives while the island faces one of its deepest economic crises in decades. Reuters reports that Cuba continues to struggle with severe shortages of fuel, electricity, and basic goods. The government is using the anniversary to celebrate Castro's revolutionary legacy, while critics point to the economic hardships facing ordinary Cubans. So today in Cuba, there are two very different conversations happening at the same time. One about history, and another about survival. Money and markets. Now, let's talk money. And here's an interesting twist. Oil prices are actually falling this morning. Brent crude dropped below $87 a barrel, while U.S. crude moved toward $81. Why? Markets are balancing Middle East supply risks against weakening global demand forecasts. U.S. crude inventories also rose sharply, adding downward pressure on prices. The International Energy Agency is forecasting a significant contraction in global oil demand this year. So even though the Strait of Hormuz remains a major geopolitical risk, traders are saying we still have to worry about how much oil people are actually buying. Stocks, meanwhile, are moving higher. Reuters reports global shares rose Thursday as oil prices moved back below $90. Investors are also digesting yesterday's U.S. inflation report and its implications for Federal Reserve policy. So today's market scorecard. Stocks, up. Oil, down. Fed expectations, complicated. And that's Wall Street in 3 sentences. Weather Watch. Now let's check the tropics. And we've got some activity to watch. The National Hurricane Center is tracking Tropical Storm Cristobal in the Atlantic. The storm is currently far from land and moving northeast. The latest forecast has Cristobal weakening into a tropical depression. There are also additional disturbances being monitored across the Atlantic basin. For Florida, the Caribbean, and the Gulf Coast, there is currently no immediate land threat from Cristobal. But August is when tropical activity can ramp up quickly, so keep watching. And remember, the cone is not a target. It's a forecast. Sports World. Football is officially back. The 2026 NFL preseason begins in earnest tonight with 6 games on the schedule. And if you're a football fan, this is the part of the year where everybody suddenly believes their team is going to the Super Bowl, including the guy whose team went 4-13 last year. Tonight's lineup includes Detroit at Cincinnati, Green Bay at Pittsburgh, Indianapolis at New England, Arizona at Las Vegas, the Chargers at Houston, and Tennessee at San Francisco. Of course, preseason football comes with one major disclaimer. Don't fall in love with the score. Coaches are evaluating players. Starters may play only a few series. And by the 4th quarter, you may be watching somebody whose family just found out he made the roster. But that's football. And after months without meaningful NFL action, it's good to have the boys back. Dumbass of the Day. And now, it's time for Dumbass of the Day. Today's award goes to the person who looks at the Strait of Hormuz and says, "Don't worry, the oil market will figure it out." Meanwhile, Iran says it's controlling the strait. The United States says it has control. Shipping companies are nervous, oil traders are nervous, and consumers are watching the gas pump. That's not a plan. That's a geopolitical game of who's driving the boat. Congratulations, you've won today's Dumbass of the Day. Your trophy is currently stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. Closing. And that's your World News in 5 for Thursday, August 13th, 2026. Today we covered the U.S. economy, the continuing Iran-Hormuz confrontation, the devastating earthquake in Colombia, Latin America's looming El Niño threat, Cuba's economic crisis, the markets, the tropics, and the return of NFL preseason football. I'm Jack Storm. Thanks for spending part of your morning with us here at El Radio Phoenix. Remember, stay informed, stay curious, and don't take everything you see on social media as gospel. Especially if somebody tells you their favorite team is winning the Super Bowl because they looked great in the preseason. I'm Jack Storm. Have a great Thursday, and I'll see you tomorrow for another edition of World News in 5. El Radio Phoenix, where the world comes to you.